Thank you for pressing start on episode 73 of Underplayed, KZUM's indie video game podcast. Today, we have two secret games, followed by a review of our featured game, Another Crab's Treasure. Here on Underplayed, we review indie games of all kinds, the games with small budgets but big hearts, the lesser-known experiences with imaginative ideas. I'm Bo Po, but it's not only me. There's a guy with a flow who's on a journey, so won't you put your hands together, please, for the Zeo Drifter, the indie game sifter, the curse-cracking mister, DiscoCola. What is going on?
Bopo, I had some time off recently, so I've been living like a hermit a little bit, but today I'm coming out of my shell. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. My laser-eyed, rocket-launching spider crab. Those are references to our featured game.
Horrifying references.
One of them is more accurate than the other. We'll let the audience decide which is that. Those are references to our featured game, Another Crab's Treasure. This is a game that I feel like both of us have been looking forward to playing for a long time.
Yeah, I wanted to play it on release. I just couldn't, was busy.
I wonder, has it been about a year since it came out?
Ooh, that sounds right.
Crab's Treasure. I feel like it was spring of last year.
I was really banking on a physical copy too, so that was part of why I held off.
Yes, and you'd think by now maybe there would be one. April 25th, 2024 is when it came out.
Very close, yeah.
Close to the year anniversary of this game, and we have now played it, and we will be reviewing that later. And this is a Souls-like game. This is a longer game.
Mm-hmm.
Every season tends to have at least one or two longer games. So this is one of those longer games this season.
Yeah. Rarely have them quite this long. Even our longest games are rarely quite this long, but even still.
Yeah. We each probably have dozens of hours of playtime to draw from for the review. So that'll be interesting. Here at the top, I wanted to talk briefly about Steam Next Fest February/March 2025 edition. Usually it lands in February, but it was a little bit later in the month this time. So by the time this episode's out, Next Fest will be pretty far in the rearview mirror. But I'm still thinking about these demos that I played. Now, I played dozens of demos.
You played a lot. You had like a list of almost 50, right?
It may have been a few dozen more than 50.
Holy buckets.
After the Next Fest week, I continued playing more demos.
What the krill.
And what the krill. And as we sit down, I actually still have 3 demos I'd like to play. So I haven't technically played everything that's in my list, but I've played a vast majority of everything. So I played the most I've ever played from any Next Fests. I didn't think I would do that. I didn't want to do that, and then I did that.
Yeah, you got a lot of stuff to play right now.
Yes, and I have responsibilities, and but also this Next Fest was really alluring. This was an amazing Next Fest, in my opinion. I thought it blew some of the others out of the water. I think it was way better than October's, for instance.
Okay.
Yeah. You saw me play a couple of these on stream.
I did, yeah.
And I'm going to talk about them in the order that I played them. These are 5 highlights for me from Steam Next Fest. The first one is Tempopo. And the Steam page says, a psychedelic soundscape in the sky, puzzle through the seasons by conducting chaotic tempopo to rescue musical flowers, design and populate your melodic garden, then let the music play, baby. I added baby. That's not part of it. This is developed by Witchbeam, the creators of Unpacking.
Yes.
And
quite a different game.
I know. I think just in 2 games, they can show their range here. And I'm excited about Tempopo because it has awesome music. The graphics are just beautiful. It's set in the sky. You place down these blocks. You try to arrange the level so that musically and rhythmically things play out in the right way so that your Tempopo pick up the things they need to without getting harmed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very isometric. You can move the camera around a lot. The music is really fun and lively. You build a garden using flowers you find. So I just think this game's beautiful.
One of the games I wanted to mention, it kind of reminds me of Captain Toad. It kind of reminds me of Gardens Between. Mm-hmm. And it kind of reminds me of your box game, Bonfire
Peaks.
Yeah.
Yes. Take all those things. And if they had a baby together, it would maybe be Tempopo. Yeah. Really great game. And I think even though this is the first one I'm talking about, I think this is maybe my game of the fest. I think it's my favorite.
Cool.
I think it edges out the others just a little bit in a lot of ways.
Awesome.
So yeah, and I don't think I even played everything that was in it. My next one is This Seat Taken? The Steam page says, Is This Seat Taken is a logic puzzle game where you play matchmaker for groups of hilariously particular people. Each character has pet peeves that make seating them a delightful challenge. Find the perfect spot for each person to unlock new levels in this cozy, silly, and relatable experience. This is developed by Poti Studio, and I think it's their first game. This is a game you know about.
Mm-hmm.
I think you said that this one looked alluring to you.
Yeah, I really want to play it. I just sitting there watching you play it, I'm like, oh no, wait, put this one there.
Yeah.
That would be better. And I wanted to play it.
It's a game where you organize things. So it was calling to your Wilmot brain, or whatever. But this is a game about little guys with cute little faces and legs, and they have preferences about where they want to sit. And you arrange them so that their preferences are all satisfied. And it starts out really simply. You just have a few of them. You place them on buses, you place them in movie theater seats, and they'll say things like, I want to sit next to this person with this name, or I want a window seat, or I don't want to sit next to somebody who's stinky.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are people who haven't showered, and
Yeah.
so you don't place those people next to each other.
Yeah.
And the complexity ramps up, but at a really comfortable pace. I feel like it doesn't get overwhelming. It really steadily steps you forward on the difficulty. So I cannot wait for this. I love the color palette too. It's
yeah,
really gentle colors, pastel kind of muted colors. I just love the style of this one.
Yeah, so where I work now, I recently had a position where I did a lot more creative work. I now do more day-to-day clerical stuff, but I, create the program schedule, and I have to keep in mind people's availability versus, where is it most appropriate for that to go in the schedule. It's a lot it's the same part of my brain.
This is a game for stage managers and wedding planners.
That's a great. Yeah.
I think those people would love.
I am neither of those things, by the way, since
right.
I'm being vague.
Right.
But I am neither of those things.
But program directors, wedding planners, and stage managers will love Is This Seat Taken? My next one is Asgard's Fall. You also watched me play this, I think.
Was this the Vampire Survivors like?
It is.
Okay,
yes.
yeah.
The Steam page says, embark on an epic saga in Asgard's Fall, a Norse survivors-like roguelite. Fight your way through hordes of creatures and let the gods feel your relentless wrath. How will your saga unfold? This is developed by Soul Potion, which is a great dev name. That is a really cool name. I easily played this for a couple hours without feeling the time pass.
And you were good at it. You nailed it. You were so good at it.
Well, I think what it does really well is it is easy to understand if you've played other survivors likes. And it took me a run to understand a unique mechanic going on in it. But once I understood the web of weird, which is a main mechanic here that makes it stand out, that is what I was obsessed with. And the more you pay attention to that, the better you can do, I think. This is a place where you slot in, I don't know the proper terminology, but maybe runes, little upgrades that can synergize really well. And you can place them in close proximity in a specific way to really change the outcome of your attacks. And so I was doing my best to make a build of sorts, but you also do the traditional things in a survivor's like you choose which weapons are going to fire on their own as you're walking around this top-down map. But then that extra layer of the web of weird allows you to really find cool synergies and find just awesome upgrades. So I loved it. Dodging, I think, is really important. That's how I got through, and I was getting extra dodges on my web of weird. So that's how I was able to survive so long. So it's just one of those games I can keep playing and playing. The next one is Arctic Awakening. The Steam page says, a first-person narrative adventure set in the unforgiving Arctic. Your plane crashed in a storm, leaving only your court-mandated therapy bot for company as you journey to find your co-pilot and uncover the mysteries buried beneath the ice. This is developed by Goldfire Studios. This game is basically a very cinematic first-person Firewatch-like game, but set in a very cold Arctic place. And it's a very sort of slow burn where your plane crashes. You have a friend that you need to get to, but you also have a sidekick in the form of this bot. And I thought this was just super immersive. And I don't really want to say a whole lot else about it. I think there's a lot of sci-fi stuff maybe going on with this later in the game that I can't wait to uncover too. So one of those mystery games that has a lot hiding for us. And then lastly, in a very similar vein, there's Radio Light. This is also a first-person atmospheric game. And the Steam page says, Ashwood Creek, 1985, a child disappears without a trace. A local policeman is drawn into a national park. Seeking the truth, mysterious radio signals beckon him further and further. Investigate, survive, and face the unknown in Radio Light, an 80s thriller by solo dev Christoph Nessel. So this was just so well done atmospherically. This is another slow burn of sorts. You are walking through the woods at night. You've got a flashlight, and you're tracking these missing people down. And kind of like Firewatch, you're talking to this guy on your radio, and very supernatural things start happening. But it's a very slow ramp up. You'll notice things out of place, out of sorts. You'll notice lights on in places that they shouldn't be on. You'll notice like blood on a rock, and you'll wonder what that's about. And you find a cabin eventually. So just the tension ramps up super well in this game. And I had chills down my spine playing this. So sort of my horror pick of the list this time.
Yeah,
So
I'm all about those creepy radio signals, dude.
I think you will really dig this.
Okay.
I think you will really dig this. So those were my picks from Next Fest. There were many more I liked. There's something else we want to talk about here at the top.
Yeah, we were recently involved in a collaboration. By the time this episode officially releases, you can check that out. We can't say much more than that. It's a bit of a surprise.
Ooh.
But because we reveal our episodes a day early on Twitch, we have to be a little vague because the Twitch premiere is before the collaboration drops. So just keep an eye peeled to your podcast services for a special little bonus collaboration.
Yeah, we'll talk about it more. It's kind of confusing because of the order we're recording things, but we'll talk about it more maybe next episode. Before we move on, if you're listening to Underplayed right now, thank you so much. We love you. If you haven't already, please give us a follow and a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That would only take a few seconds, and we'd really appreciate it. And if you have a friend who likes indie games, share our podcast with them too. We would also appreciate getting the word out about Underplayed. It is time for our secret games.
Secret games. Secret games. Secret games. Secret games.
In Secret Games, we each review an indie game we've been playing recently. We don't discuss what we're going to review in advance. We keep it a surprise for this very moment we're recording.
This moment you're in right now.
Yes, I have no idea what you're going to talk about. I don't know which game you chose to review today. You don't know what I chose?
It's even less of a clue.
Even less of a clue.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't know how you would know that. I'm confused
You
even
just
more.
play so much stuff, it could be almost
sure.
anything.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, we'll start with you, DiscoCola. Let the mystery be no more. Reveal your secret game for episode 73 of Underplayed.
Well, my secret game also has crabs. Kind of. They might be more spiders. It also has a significant blood-sucking parasite that you encounter in the game, like today's featured game.
A crazy billionaire?
A crazy billionaire.
Really?
That was the joke.
That was the joke?
You got it. And there's also vampires. My secret game is #blood.
Adventure awaits in Carpentersville. So grab a controller, don't miss class, Get on that bus and kick some vampire ass. #blood.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. Yes.
Hey.
It took me a second for me to process the name. But yes, I've watched you play this on Twitch. Awesome. Yes, love this.
So if you look online for a trailer for #Blood, it really covers everything, even more than I will here. But for those that aren't getting the full trailer experience, you play as Becky Brewster after she transfers to Carpentersville. And while unpacking, Becky wants to find her mom's old cookbook. But long story short, one thing leads to another. And before you know it, the cookbook is actually a grimoire, and Becky is falling deep into a generations-long fight against vampire kind.
That's such a cool setup.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah. Becky will also be assisted by a vast cast of supporting characters, including Corey, who is Becky's knowledgeable and tech-savvy neighbor, Becky's father, who's an employee at the social media platform Perch. You'll also meet Christopherson eventually, who knew your mother and trains you in the art of fighting vampires. And there are also several other classmates that become quick friends at Carpentersville High. Becky will use her field hockey stick in terms of gameplay to beat up vampires and other enemies. You will be able to upgrade your hockey stick to include things like an umbrella shield or a grappling hook and many more. You'll also gain access to projectiles like number 2 pencils and cherry bombs. And then you also have access to a dodge roll. And then lastly, a massive part of this game is played with your phone. Not your phone that you have in your pocket, but Becky's phone. In this game, Becky has a smartphone, and you can use this phone to take selfies with any NPC or nearly any enemy in the game, and you will then post those on social media with unique posts for each newly encountered character.
And this is how you discover more information about them. This is how you get their weaknesses and things, from what I understand.
Weaknesses from enemies, or just like make snide remarks about some person you met in the taco bar, and have all your friends or the owner of Perch comment on them.
Nice.
And with all these skills at your disposal, you will explore Carpentersville in this mostly linear beat-em-up exploration game to uncover the secrets of the vampires and their associates in Carpentersville and bring them all down. That's the setup. That's the gameplay. Do you have any questions about anything?
I've actually seen this game streamed by several friends, including you. I've watched you play this for, a couple hours. I've seen, different areas of the game. So I've seen the social media stuff. I've seen the combat. I've seen some bosses and things. So I just don't know how it all connects necessarily. I don't know like the full story and all the characters, but I have been fortunate enough to see a decent amount.
I guess I could mention some of the locales you'll visit. You'll find yourself visiting a campground. You can visit a mall. You'll obviously be visiting Carpentersville High, as well as your own local neighborhood. And then there's also downtown Carpentersville, a hospital. There's a couple more, but that's most of them. And then you'll find secrets hidden around. You can upgrade your health by finding heart fragments. And there are special finisher moves that you can find throughout Carpentersville as well.
Feels like a variety of locations that you'd see in a sci-fi or fantasy show or movie about it.
Like a CW kind of a show.
Exactly.
There's going to be an episode or two in the mall.
Yeah. And then the style here, this has a very distinct sort of animated style that reminds me of some cartoons I've seen.
It's a great animated style. More on that in a minute, obviously. But I hit all the bullet points. I'm going to move on to stuff that I like about #Blood. Shocking no one at all. Art direction is at the top of my list here. If you take just the quickest look at anything from #Blood, it looks so beautiful. There are so many amazing and detailed animations for enemies and NPCs, and Becky especially. And then there's animated cutscenes, and these are just supremely impressive. There's even an interactive QuickTime event cutscene, and it's all done so amazingly well. But because it's a QuickTime cutscene, that means that you have points where like the animation will change based on how you perform. So they had to, animate for all those different
Yeah.
possibilities.
And you can't necessarily sit back and just enjoy it and put the
Right.
controller down.
Yeah.
Like you're still playing.
Yes, it's incredible how much work they put into this game.
I don't think I saw that part.
It's
Yeah.
only one part and it's pretty quick.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like some of the best of Cartoon Network and tons of frames in every animation. The characters, when you talk to characters, you see the close-ups of them and they're so expressive in this game.
Absolutely. It's beautiful. Gameplay all feels really great. Dispatching most enemies after a little 1, 2, 3 feels really good. And then when you pair that with their kind of like sort of slow but full of frames death animation, combat's just super rewarding. They even change up what it takes to defeat newer enemies as you get further into the game, so you don't get stuck doing that same standard 1, 2, 3 throughout the whole game. That is what defeats most enemies, but it changes it up on you, so you get different animations and you get to diversify your combat abilities as well. Speaking of defeating enemies, there's a massive enemy variety here. The threat at large is vampires, yes, but there are a huge variety just in vampires. There's the bouncy, gluttonous vampires. There's the underground vampires. There's these little stout vampires that can block your melee attacks. There's daywalkers. And there's just so many different kinds of vampires. But there's also sirens and rats and mutated insects and other kinds of creatures I've never even heard of before. So there is just a huge variety of enemies to encounter throughout Carpentersville and all of the different dungeons and hidden sections of the game.
The variety is really impressive to me as someone who can only just think of like vampire has the long black cloak and the pale skin.
And you
like,
even get that vampire in the game.
You get that, but then you get so many other varieties. Going on.
It's incredible. Vampire types that I don't even know if existed before #1.
Oh, cool.
So another thing I love is that I do like the humor in the game. I do get the sense that like much humor I've encountered in life, it might not age well, but at the time that it exists, I think it's good for now. And I especially like all of the swipes at social media and big tech, similar to Aggro Crab's games.
Yeah.
So more synergy there. So for now, the humor hits. I don't think it will age gracefully, but it's prescient and funny for now. Speaking of social media, this is probably one of the very few times I'll offer this praise, but I love the smartphone in this game.
Hey!
It tracks our collection, it has our map, but mostly the social media game in this game is really fun. A little bit less so for the NPCs, but I think it's such a cute and fun idea to slow down in battle, pick your, face that you're going to make, and strategically plan the safest moment to take a selfie with the enemies. And that's also the way you complete their bestiary entry. Just anytime I find a new enemy I haven't fought before, I look forward to that moment because I'm like, what's the opening? What silly face am I going to make? How do I make this the funniest it can be? But also, I'm going to get a new mark in my bestiary as well.
I seem to remember when you were streaming this and I was watching that one time, you were almost collecting the selfies with the enemies.
Yep.
And you were walking around saying something like, oh, I need one more in this area. Or, you were kind of treating it as like almost like a creature collector.
Yes,
sort of
it
thing.
is a little bit like a creature collector. And it's so fun. I love it. And you get to make all these, you get to choose from like 15 or something silly faces that you can make. So if there's like an especially repulsive looking enemy, you can make like a near vomiting kind of facial expression.
Yes,
you just get to pick whatever you want, and you can be funny, you can play it straight, you can just snap the picture, but it's a great time.
Demon Turf had something kind of similar, not with as many features and not as integral to the gameplay, but you could also do selfies.
I do seem to remember that
Yeah.
Beebs had a phone.
Yeah.
As for complaints, I do have a few. Music is good, but it can be pretty repetitive. But this goes especially for the song that plays inside Becky's house. On its own, it's a perfectly fine song, but the loop is it's really short and it doesn't go a lot of places musically. So you after the fourth loop, you're like, dun, 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 dun. I just want it to stop, you know. But like I said, overall music is fine, just repetitive. This is a small nitpick, but in games that have like movement tech like this, my instinct is to use the dodge roll to get around fast as possible. So if you think like Hollow Knight, once you get the dash, you're not walking anymore. You're dashing everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's my instinct to do that here. But the dodge roll has like a long tail at the end of its animation. And so in the end, I don't think it's actually any faster. Possibly it's even slower to just dodge roll to get around. I don't know. I didn't pull out a stopwatch or anything. But as it stands, the default movement speed feels like I could have a faster option. But I did notice that it is dodge rolling and walking ultimately is at least the same, if not slower to dodge
Probably
roll.
to dissuade people from
Probably to
using
dissuade
it.
people from doing it.
Yeah, from using the dodge roll outside of any scenario other than fighting. So
yeah, I know that's the intention, but I do want a faster option to get around. But my other complaint, this is sort of like a season-wide complaint, and it's been kind of a breaking point for me after finishing #Blood. And I'm getting really sick of missable trophies, especially ones that take like a lot of work or a lot of setup.
Okay.
Chris Tales, One Shot, Little Guardsman. Even Inscription had it. And so for
What's
me,
with all these games?
I know
trophies?
and a lot of them are a lot of work to build up.
Did you look up this game's trophy list before?
I
you started
did,
playing?
but I didn't want any spoilers.
Yeah.
And even still, like, I'll get to it, but it just, for me, #Blood just kind of like took me to my limit with this. Like in this game, you get trophies for taking pictures with each available NPC. You get a trophy for each available enemy. And then there's also like special selfie spots that aren't tied to NPCs or enemies. And this game just has like loads and loads of NPCs and loads of enemies. And I also mentioned earlier that this game is linear, which means that characters will be in different spots or non-existent depending on the chapter. You'll also lose access to areas depending on which chapter you're in, which effectively locks you out of not only some of the selfie trophies, but also like exploration-based trophies. And to top it all off, there's no good or easy way to tell if you've taken a selfie with one of the NPCs unless you pull out and look through your entire social media feed, or if you just take the picture with them and find at the end a generic caption on your post. That's the only way to like know for sure you've already taken a picture.
So you're doing all
with
these
them.
extra steps to be thorough.
Yes, on top of it,
Yeah.
I'm it's super easy to fail and miss somebody, so I'm wasting a lot of time taking selfies with people I've already taken photos with. So it's just it was really disappointing to try and be as careful as I could, explore every corner of Carpentersville in every chapter best I could, Mutazione style, and still miss stuff.
Good comparison. I've been there before.
Yeah.
And, you could say, that's such a minor thing, like not worthy of complaining. But if they're going to put an achievement/trophy in the game,
and
that's
then
that.
Also intentionally make the choice to lock some of those points off in the game.
That is adding some frustration.
Yes. I understand that most people are not playing 20 games a year with, 2 young children at home and a full-time job. Like, I understand that's not everyone's life.
Right.
If they have to play the great game that is #Blood again, that's not going to be a big deal for a lot of people. But I have to play this game again, and I have to have a checklist in hand. And that's a bit of a bummer, even if I enjoyed the game. So it's a complaint, a normal-sized complaint for #Blood, but it's just, this whole season has just kind of worn me down with that.
I think it's just been a coincidence.
Yeah.
Just an awful coincidence.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
I've done pretty well with the other games, but it's just like, it's stressful to like go through a game, to want to also avoid spoilers, but also know that there's this stuff that's just going to add time to your gameplay if you don't do it right.
I feel like if you and I worked on a game, or maybe if we were consultants, this is what we would specialize in.
Yeah.
Is just, how do you design the rewards, the achievement system in a way that has thoughtfulness?
Yeah. We can't talk about it yet, but there's a game that we play in our upcoming but also already done collaboration.
Okay.
Actually did a great job at that.
Oh, good.
So
yeah. That's great because as we sit down to record, I haven't. Anyway,
yes.
That's going to confuse it.
Yeah.
Keep going.
But anyways, in the end, this game is pretty much a great delight from start to finish. I like the humor, I love the characters, and I absolutely love the jaw-dropping care that went into the animation of this game. Everything feels good to play. Everything looks good. You're only really in for some pain if you're a completionist, and even knowing how hard it is to complete, it's still quite enjoyable to collect all the selfies and all the tokens. I'm a little bit bummed that I have to go through everything again, but the time I did have with #Blood was really great. And I really hope that #Blood's best days are still ahead of it.
Mhm.
I think if you get the right influencer to play this, that #Blood's gonna explode. I think a lot of people could play this, and I hope its best days are ahead.
And like it could even be a franchise, maybe, or influence.
If nothing else, like big enough to have maybe someday been a featured game, because I think this is a very high quality game through and through.
I'm actually surprised this game didn't like blow up more.
Yeah.
Not to say it wasn't popular. It's just I thought more people would be talking about it at the end of 2024, for example.
Mhm.
I try to pay attention to end of year lists and all kinds of gaming sites and what they rank as their favorite games of the year. And I saw this pop up a couple times, but not as much as I expected it to.
I really hope their best days are ahead of them still. I think if you get the right person to play it online, ton more people are going to play this. It is a very high quality game. It is a game that is just made with so much soul, and I do really love it. So I will give #Blood, with the caveat that I haven't played the DLC yet.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
There's something called Werewolf DLC. I didn't have time to play it.
It's just called Werewolf DLC?
Yes.
I love that.
Anyways, I give #Blood an 8.5 out of 10.
Wonderful. Yeah, this is one of the most recent games published by Humble Games, which is the publishing arm of Humble Bundle.
And there's actually I mentioned tokens very briefly. It's a collectible in the game. And there are like 6 tokens in the game that are references to other Humble games.
Oh.
One of them's like a token for unpacking.
Oh,
So
that's really cool.
Yeah, I love references to other games in games.
Well, I know that in this past year, Humble Games announced that they were restructuring and they laid off dozens of staff. And people were wondering, oh my gosh, is Humble Games done? And apparently they're still going to proceed with future projects, and they've continued to slowly release games. But this game was released around that time when all of that was happening. So we hope everything just ends up being okay for all those people involved. I guess if I had to ask you about anything, I'd just be curious about anecdotes, like a favorite boss fight or a favorite sequence of the game. Like,
Ooh, okay. Well, all of the animated cutscenes were really cool. The QuickTime event cutscene is like burned into my brain as just being one of the coolest moments of the season.
nice.
So Dragur is the main baddie vampire. He is kind of like a mythical being.
Mhm.
He doesn't play a huge role in most of the game other than he's like the big bad. He's like Dr. Wily waiting at the end.
Yeah.
But he has these like 2 lieutenants or whatever. And one of the boss fights with the lieutenants uses this like cool rock monster that he rides on. That boss fight is really cool. But then both the lieutenants come together in a boss fight and they like merge their bodies together. And then you're essentially fighting both of their boss fights at the same time.
Oh, sick.
It's so cool. There's a lot of cool boss
And you
fights.
can use your knowledge from those previous fights in this one.
Yeah, exactly. And so you know what to do, but
I love
also
stuff
you
like
have
that.
to like dodge both attack patterns at the same time.
Oh, love
And
that.
just like all of the bosses are really cool. There's a goat that transforms into this weird monster.
I've seen that one.
And it's so
that one's so gory.
disgusting,
Yeah.
and it's awesome. They just
It's
all
like on
look
a
so
soccer
cool.
field or
Yeah.
something. Yeah,
Yep.
I've seen that one.
It's
That's so
all
cool.
really cool.
Awesome. Well, where can you play #Blood?
#Blood, which I didn't mention, is from developer Exit 73 Studios and can be played on PC, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and I played it on PlayStation 4.
Nice. It is time for my secret game. My secret game is called MainFrames.
I thought you might do this.
I was originally going to maybe replay something and have it in this slot. I had a plan, DiscoCola, for every secret game slot this season, and I've rearranged over half of them.
Wow,
or,
really?
Or changed them out entirely as we've gone on.
I've only changed it last season. I did that, but this season it was only like 2.
They've been locked in place.
Pretty much.
That's been my story up until this season, largely. But yeah, so this is a recent game. This is a 2025 platformer. This is developed by Asupi, I think is how we say them. And then published by the Arcade Crew. Another really cool name for a group of people.
Yeah, at the time of recording, I think you just played this for the first time like 2 days ago or something.
Yeah, I just played it recently. So it's fresh on my mind, which is good if I'm going to review it, right? So the game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, MainFrames invites you to meet Floppy and to browse a clever and charming platformer that plays out entirely within the windows and desktop of a PC monitor. You won't want to press the escape key on this cozy outing, end quote. I talked about this game earlier this season when we talked about games we're looking forward to.
I remember that.
So here we are. We're already tackling one. And I want to thank our friend Emily, aka A Specific Egg, who actually gifted me this game on Steam.
Hackers, dude.
Thank you, friend. I really appreciate that. So in this game, this is a 2D platformer with pixel graphics and a very specific setting, a computer screen. This is very much like The Pedestrian from several seasons ago, where that game took place almost entirely on street signage. You're the little bathroom sign guy walking across different signs. And similarly, in MainFrames, you play as a floppy disk character who can only move on this computer screen. You play as Floppy, a floppy disk icon, and the view of the game is the computer screen. And it's actually not just like what you would see on the computer screen. You're actually almost someone sitting in front of the computer screen. And because you can see the edges, the borders around the screen.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a like room reflection too in the glass.
Sometimes you see smudges on the screen, like you would leave a thumbprint. So that's very interesting. But mostly it's just looking at this screen and you transition between all of these different areas. And the game opens with Floppy living a simple existence in their home on this screen. But suddenly their home becomes a window, and that window shrinks until they fall down into the hidden, more background areas of the computer system. And down there, you meet several characters. You meet a penguin, who I think is supposed to be a play on the mascot character for Linux. Tux is its name. Have you ever seen the Linux penguin?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's what's going on here. There's also Miss Key. There's a bunch of little process dudes and mini daemons who you can collect. And there are 2 daemons named Dean and Dan who tell you a little bit about what's going on between all of the levels. And if you don't know, daemons are background programs that perform tasks and run without user interaction.
Why do they have to call them something so similar to demons? That's upsetting.
I'm not sure about the reason for that, but they're commonly found in Linux operating systems. So I found this game to be a little educational in that way. I did some research afterwards and found this out because I didn't know this term. I was like, is this actually a thing? It's got to be a thing in computing, and it is. And my dad used to do a lot of stuff with Linux computers.
Really?
But I really only would see the systems and I would see the penguin, and that's...
See, I kind of thought he was more of just like an electrical, took things apart, mechanical kind of stuff.
He has a lot of experience with that too. He has a diverse range of like technical and electronic backgrounds. So I was familiar with the appearance of Linux, but not really some of this nomenclature for things. So I think this game is inspired by that sort of computing, and you find messaging notes from various members of a development team that tell a human side to this story. You'll run across these chat messages back and forth between these people who have names, and it's like you're finding their conversation long after it happens. So you're picking up on something else going on. You have to move Floppy through screens, and you largely jump to and from windows on screen. There are 8 chapters, and in each one, you are using new platforming ideas. You have bumpers that bounce you in various directions and gears that rotate those bumpers. You have to avoid red glitchy blocks that hurt you. There's a cursor that you can use to select various windows within view, and you use your shoulder buttons on your controller to move the cursor to select windows. And sometimes windows can be moved to create the layout of platforms you need to progress.
Yeah, very much like the pedestrian.
Yes.
Again. Yeah.
And so you're using your right stick sometimes to move windows and your left stick to move floppy, sometimes almost simultaneously. And orienting the windows and then moving floppy along those windows becomes a huge part of this game. And I would say that's how the platforming in this game stands out from other platformers. There are branching areas you can explore to do quick challenges to help a mini process escape. This is where you're just helping a little guy.
Just a little guy.
Get to an elevator, for instance. And then there are other little guys you can collect just by spinning into them. There's a spin move that allows you to sustain your jump. And that's also how you can collect these little characters. And this game kind of feels like Celeste, but there isn't an emotionally affecting story about anxiety, and it's on a computer screen. You're not climbing a mountain, but a lot of the ideas of the platforming and the kind of music, the style of the game is really similar to Celeste, I would say. So if you like Celeste, I think you would benefit from looking into MainFrames. Here's what I liked about MainFrames. I don't usually start here, but kind of like where you started with #blood, the look and the sound. This game fully commits to the idea of computer screens and windows. There are background wallpapers that are beautiful. They use parallax to great effect. There are nice little touches like smudges on the screen and glitchy particles as you move throughout. The soundtrack is full of really boppy and chill electronic music. Some of it is kind of chiptune-y.
Yeah.
The soundscape is full of boopy sounds. I don't know how else to describe them.
Beeps and boops.
Beeps and boops and bops. And retro style effects are going on. So there's this feeling of classic computer tech that's fully committed to. I love that.
But not in the same way that like
Hypnospace Outlaw.
Yeah.
Hypnospace Outlaw had, more of a degenerate feeling to it. This feels more
This
wholesome.
is more like default operating system
Right.
icon settings.
Like, what if the icons, not just like, what would the degenerates of the late 90s do on the open internet? That's Hypnospace Outlaw. This is, what if the innermost parts of your computer came alive and were just in a very creative space in a platformer? That's what's going on here. I love the variety of cool ideas with the gameplay. There's quantity and quality with the platforming. We play with direction. We select windows in really clever ways. Almost every screen, you're doing something different. There is discipline in how much each idea is used too. Nothing is ever overused. And I was actually afraid of that, especially using your right stick on your gamepad to move windows. You'd think that would be happening every chapter. And it happens like a few times throughout, but never too much. And I thought, this is going to be like really distracting. It's only like a few times here and there. So it's paced really well.
Cool.
Nothing outstays its welcome. There are fun little challenges and collectibles. There are the process dudes that change how I play. I'll enter a screen and I'll see the little guys I can spin into to collect them. And I'll go, I got to focus on getting those little guys. Instead of just focusing on getting to the exit of that screen, I'm changing how I'm playing because I see these little guys that I want. I also love those little platforming and puzzle challenges to guide your friends to the elevators. There are some platforming challenges that are really complex looking too. And the more you break them down, the more you realize that sometimes you can cheat a little bit or skip many parts on the screen. And so you feel really smart when you figure that out. And I would say that's a way this game is kind of a puzzle game too. You'll see a screen full of windows that change your direction. And then you find out, I only need to use a couple of them to get through. I think this game is the perfect length. I finished it in around 4 hours, and that's while I was streaming it.
Yeah.
So it could be it's probably like 4 to 5 hours for most people. Maybe it's on the lower end of that range. And in that time, I died 801 times, but I don't feel like I died 801 times.
Right.
Not that the game is counting too much. It just doesn't feel like I died that much because
it doesn't feel exhausting. It doesn't feel like you're being defeated.
Exactly. And like Celeste, it's throwing you right back into the action when you die. It's immediate respawning, and that's always a positive for me. There are some things I dislike about MainFrames. Some things that I think could have been pretty easily fixed or just design decisions that frustrate me from time to time. And what I like about this game is that it pretty much always shows and doesn't tell with new ideas, but sometimes a side effect of that is that it leads to confusion about how something works. So there are calendar windows that can propel you upwards, but I didn't know this right away. I just thought they were windows I could toggle on and off to create platforms. If you land inside of one and toggle it, it can actually shoot you upward. And that's really useful. But I felt like the game didn't teach me that where I discovered the calendar windows. So there are moments where you tinker a little too long to figure out what's going on. Also, there are lots of side paths leading to fun things, but I almost can never tell what the main path is and where the side paths are. And I got too far on a main path before realizing that was the main path, and then I missed out on tons of side stuff. So that was disappointing.
A little bit of synergy maybe with today's featured game at times.
Oh, really? I didn't find that happening as much with Another Crab's Treasure, but
did.
You did? Okay, that might be a discussion point later then. But yeah, that is definitely what's going on. You will enter a screen. There might be 2 or 3 paths from that screen to progress. And so you have to do the thing where you just dip your toe in each, see what looks like the main path, and sometimes I can't tell, or sometimes there are multiple paths that have, then multiple screens branching off from those. And there isn't a map in this game. So you can't check where you've been easily. You have to use your memory. So that was a little clunky, and I got confused and lost in some places. There are some parts that are unnecessarily difficult as well. I'm thinking of a platforming section at the end of chapter 4. It is brutally hard compared to pretty much every other part of the game.
Yeah.
There are also sections of the game where you need to do speed platforming because the level is breaking apart and you have to not die. And sometimes you do an animation to climb up onto a ledge to get to the top of a platform, which is nice. But that climbing animation really slows you down.
Yeah.
And if you have to do that once or twice, that might slow you down enough that you fail. So
it's like if you're fast enough and you know the right timing, maybe you can avoid the climb animation and just like jump over and around kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But the climb animation is safer.
yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes platforms are so skinny that I'm trying to aim for the top, but because the window is so little
It's
to
very
nail
small,
it,
yeah.
I might do the climbing animation by accident. So some nitpickier things there, but another thing I would mention here is that you can't backtrack with level select to clean up collectibles.
Oh, darn it.
I don't think there's a way to chapter select in this game, and I really wish there was because I'd love to go back and play a chapter 1 and 2 again. I guess I could just start a new save, but I want to do it on the same save file.
And it seemed like you were pretty close on getting all the mini daemons too.
Yeah, I got like 93% completion by the end of my playthrough. And by the time I got through chapter 1, I understood the rhythm of how the game worked. And so I knew how to progress better, but I didn't have that information at the start. So my completion at the beginning of the game was more incomplete. So overall, I was constantly surprised and learning while I was playing MainFrames. I was getting lost and I was failing sometimes in a way that didn't feel like my fault because of unclear design. But this is a delightful and fairly challenging platformer that feels like the perfect length. For me, MainFrames is an 8 out of 10.
That's what I guessed.
And it's playable on PC, which is the version I played, and Switch.
Okay. If it's available on Switch, I guess I don't really have any questions. When I was watching you play it, there was this like click sound effect, and I assumed that was you actively using a mouse. So my question was going to be, can this be played on a controller? But clearly it can.
Yeah. I played the entire game on a gamepad. That clicking sound is when I'm using the bumper to move the cursor to different windows. That sound effect just accompanies that button press.
Okay. And so
that wasn't my actual mouse being clicked, but I did test it, and you can use your mouse to change windows too.
Okay. Does it move faster, or are you still like
it's faster on a mouse
cycling through? So
you're still cycling through.
You're still cycling through.
But I
Okay.
think you can do it faster on a mouse just because you can press it faster.
Click faster.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. That's the only question I had.
Otherwise, you saw a lot of it.
I saw a lot of it. It looks really fun. I love the pixel art in this game, and just by the very nature of like being a floppy disk, you're also encouraging a lot of squares in the world, and all of the like weird, dithering at the edge of the screen is all squares. And we know from the Hyperlight Drifter game is that when we have straight edges and like weird squares in our world, I'm just like,
we love weird squares.
Fallen in love.
Yeah.
So I think this game looks beautiful. It looks maybe a little bit too challenging for me to like really fall in love with it.
This is hard to recommend to every platforming fan because I think this is pretty hard for what it is. This is a pretty unassuming game. It's cute characters, bright colors, set on a computer screen. How fun is that? And then it ends up being kind of hard.
Yeah.
I died 800 times. 800 times in 4 hours is quite a lot to die. But also in Celeste, I think if we go back to our save files in Celeste, we rack up all those deaths. I think you and I probably reached 8 to 10,000 deaths total.
Way over, like, I think I was at 3,400 at least.
Yeah. So that's a lot of dying we're doing too. And we still loved that game.
Yeah.
So I still recommend MainFrames to people who really like platformers. I think you've got to really enjoy platforming and jumping and the occasional puzzle in your platforming to enjoy this game. And also for me, this is a high 8 on the score. Like I almost rated it higher. I went down to an 8, but this is not a low 8. This is not a mid 8. This is a high 8.
We've got specified levels of that coming up later too. So I'll mention that when we get there. But yeah, it looks great. I love the look of it. It reminds me of a game called Bzzzt, which we also talked about in the same stream that you played this.
Oh, right.
And also Electhead.
Yes, Electhead. Yep.
Visually it reminds me of those games as well.
Yeah, it's really cool. I just love the style of both of our secret games today. It's just a lot of personality, a lot of like really specific direction with what they're doing.
A lot of
yeah. And I think that ties into our featured game too.
Yeah.
So those are our secret games, #blood and MainFrames. Let's move on to our review of Another Crab's Treasure. It is our featured game. Another Crab's Treasure is a 2024 action RPG Souls-like developed and published by AgroCrab. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, "In a vibrant undersea kingdom on the verge of collapse, a hermit crab embarks on a treasure hunt to buy back his repossessed shell." The second game from AgroCrab.
Recently had my shell taken away.
If you can go get that treasure they're jawing about, I'll gladly trade your shell for it.
I'm gonna find that treasure! Oh yeah, I also wanted to mention the crazy murderous crabs outside trying
Begone, little hermit, I tire of you.
Yes, ma'am!
Another Crab's Treasure has a lot going on. I have distilled the story and setting description down to, I think, something that's pretty efficient here, but let me know if I missed something that you feel is important.
Okay, I think I've got the bigger.
You have a hard job
the bigger
too.
One today. Yeah.
I think it's going to be hard to include every single thing as we set up the game, so no worries if you forget anything or if I forget anything.
Big preach, thank you.
So this is a third-person action adventure where you play as a hermit crab named Krill, and Krill lives a very apathetic existence in the tide pools until one day a loan shark arrives and tells him that he owes a debt to the Duchess, the new ruler of the area, and the loan shark takes his shell as collateral. So Krill goes into the ocean to look for the loan shark and the Duchess, and he encounters many crabs who have become hostile because they're infected by a pollution called the gunk. And through a series of subsequent tasks and combat encounters, Krill finds a moon snail that teaches him about umami, which is a magical force that he can use in combat. And everyone at the Duchess's palace becomes infected with the gunk, even the Duchess herself. So Krill eventually makes his way to New Carcinia, looking for the loan shark and his shell, and he meets many townsfolk there. New Carcinia is the central town of this game, if you will, and it rests under an island of trash. And during Trash Day, a bunch of garbage rains down on the city, and a missing map on a box of cereal is interpreted by everyone to mean that a treasure hunt is on. This is a wild description. And as part of this group, we've got Conch, a historian, Nema, a restaurant owner, Firth, an entrepreneur, and Roland, a capitalist billionaire. There's also this pawn shop owner named Pronathan who has Krill's shell. And he tells Krill that he can get his shell back if he can find and give Pronathan the treasure. So along his travels, Krill also meets with Chiton, a former guard of the Duchess, who believes that greed is at the source of everyone's hostility. And Krill must adventure further to find all these map pieces on this cereal box so that everyone can decode what's going on, where the treasure is. And Krill interacts with all the characters who have an interest in obtaining this treasure. So that's what I would say to set up the game. A little bit longer, a lot of characters, a lot of locations there. But as far as gameplay, what do we do in Another Crab's Treasure?
All right. For controls, you are a hermit crab. So as you might guess, you can scuttle.
Scuttle.
You do have access to a jump. And at the end of your jump, you can do a little bit of a tiny little swim. This is sort of, think of it more like a glide if you're playing a game that you play on land.
Yeah.
Same principle applies. You also gain access to shells, being a hermit crab, and these shells will add extra defense. While in most shells, you can also do a little bit of a roll, so you get a little bit of movement tech while you're hiding in a shell. Almost all shells have a special spell that you can cast using some of your umami charges. As Bopo mentioned, you gain access to umami. This is basically your magic. And once you gain umami, you will have access to 3 charges and can gain more. So different shell spells will cost more or less depending on the spell. And then there's also something called adaptations. If I compare this to Hollow Knight, which in my mind is starting to be more of a Souls-like as I finished Another Crab's Treasure.
I think in retrospect, or in hindsight, like as time went on, people started calling Hollow Knight sort of a Souls-like more and more.
We might have even mentioned that in the episode. And I might have been like, no, it's not. I wouldn't consider it. But if Another Crab's Treasure is, I kind of think maybe Hollow Knight is too.
I still think Hollow Knight is more a Metroidvania than a Souls-like.
Yes.
But it's got elements for sure.
Anyways, if I compare adaptations to something I am familiar with from Hollow Knight, these are your spells. And your adaptations will also use up umami charges. Again, different cost for different spells. And perhaps your most important gameplay mechanic is your fork. This is your main melee weapon. You can unlock a lot of other special moves to perform with your fork, including a massive airborne swing, a charged attack, a lunge, and there's several more that I saw Bopo use that I never used. So just naming a few there, you get a lot of tech with your fork. There's also a bit of a grappling hook. This will allow you to eventually grab enemies or grapple to certain faraway surfaces that you can't reach with your jump. Krill can also equip something called stowaways. These will add passive buffs to Krill, and you can find these throughout the world, or in some cases they can be purchased. And then by using microplastics, which is the game's currency, you can level up Krill by speccing into either attack, vitality, shell defense, which is called resistance, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Or umami effectiveness, which is called something else. I don't remember it. MSG or something.
MSG
is what they call it in the game. And then there are also various upgrades Krill can collect throughout the game, and you use all of these systems and skills to defeat the various bosses and eventually get your shell back.
Yeah, it's a Souls-like, so think bosses that hit hard, think enemies that can tend to kill you if you don't know what you're doing or you're, not being careful enough. This is a difficult game. A lot of people might look at this game and think, ooh, this is a cute underwater adventure. And it is. But both with the combat and the themes of the story, I would say that this is actually more of a mature game than it lets on.
Yeah.
This is also
if you follow AgroCrab on social media, that might not come as a big surprise.
yes. And we've followed them for a long time.
Yeah.
You've been a big fan of theirs, I know.
Yeah.
Can you describe the social media presence or just the personality of AgroCrab?
They're little pranksters, We talked in a previous episode about when the blue checkmark debacle happened on Twitter, how they posed as the Cult of the Lamb account. And
that's right.
I think they were the first ones to say, we'll add sex to the game. And then when that, blew over, Cult of the Lamb eventually added sex to the game, essentially. Like,
Right.
That's just kind of, I don't remember if that was the right order of events. But
it might have been Massive Monster started it, but AgroCrab did a yes and on it.
Yeah.
And they kept it going or something.
They're very silly.
Very silly. They actually recently won the Indie Game Award for Community Management. A lot of that has to do with what they did on social media before and after this game came out. They also won the Indie Game Award for accessibility for Another Crab's Treasure. So I'm a fan of theirs. And you've played Going Under.
Mhm.
You reviewed it previously on the show. I think just as a quick review, you loved that game. You've gone back to it many
I
times.
did like the game. I actually think Going Under is harder than Another Crab's Treasure.
Okay.
Personally, but
Yeah, it looked hard AF.
it took me longer to finish, at least.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Like dozens of hours,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
One of your longest secret games.
Yeah.
So going into Another Crab's Treasure, you had Going Under your belt, and you were excited. And I was excited just because I had heard great things about Another Crab's Treasure.
Just on its own, it looks amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of those games early on in 2024 that really gave the year momentum, I would say. And, 2024 was an amazing year for indie games. So here was one of the early ones of the year, DiscoCola. We've now both played it apart. You've seen me stream it a little bit, but I haven't talked to you about your thoughts yet. So what are your thoughts on Another Crab's Treasure?
Another Crab's Treasure was an incredible experience, but I'll break it down section by section and tell you everything that I loved. Up first, it's been a while since I started with this topic, but the music in Another Crab's Treasure is incredible, dude. It's so good. You get to like the open ocean and like maybe the second song after you're exploring through the game, you get this song that starts like 1, 2, 3, 4, dun, da 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 da, and that song is amazing. It's like an amazing start to an amazing
What
game.
a way to welcome you to this ocean.
It was so cool, and every song, like almost every song, just rules. Like Feasley did a great job with the Going Under soundtrack. That one was good, but this one heckin' slaps. It is amazing. The music in Another Crab's Treasure is so awesome.
I want to go find the soundtrack and listen to it in my car
It's
as I drive
so
around.
good,
It's
dude.
one of those.
Yeah. And just like the like minor boss theme, there's like this minor boss theme that plays for multiple different bosses. This like that one gets stuck in my head for days at a time. I love that one, dude. It's so good. The music is so good.
Love it.
The concept at play here is amazing. I love the idea of litter in the ocean, not as an idea. Obviously, I hate litter in the ocean.
Right.
But what it does to the civilization, and then how they create economic ideals around what is our trash.
Mm-hmm.
And then they expand on that like way late in the game too, in this really just hilarious, but also like pivotal scene. Like so cool. I love what AgroCrab does when they talk about economics.
It talks about really relevant things, but it reframes them in a staggering way too.
Yeah, it's so cool. I love what's at work here. I love all the characters and their designs. Like you're taking crabs, but some of them are shaped different, but each of them has like their own personality with what they decide what trash they decide is their clothing, what trash they choose to wear as their hat, and even in like the enemy types, what trash is their shell for combat. There's just so much different personality. Like I want to really shout out Nema, is that her name, right?
Yeah.
What her dress is, but also what her hat is.
Yeah, the silica packet and
the orange peel for her hat
so
that looks like hair. And it just like...
And Conch has like what looks like a potato chip for a hat or something.
But it looks like one of those like Outback,
Yes.
explorer hats. It's incredible.
I have so many examples of this that I wrote down too.
Oh, I'm glad.
I'm
looking forward to you expanding on it because I just made it very generic. But oh man, the way that they decided to use trash in all these cool ways, just in the character designs, is awesome. Boss designs and ideas are incredible.
Mm-hmm.
You have like a boss that uses chopsticks, and he's like, kind of designed after this like Japanese, not quite sumo because he's like really buff, but just
a martial artist.
Yeah, it was so incredible, and that it goes to so many different bosses. I like that the duchy has this like tea seeper or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's her
infuser.
melee weapon.
I know. When I saw that, I thought, oh, that's going to be a weapon, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then it was.
And God, there's just so much cool stuff going on with all of these designs. And that goes to the areas too. Like all of the different areas use trash in these cool ways. Like you get to New Carcinia and you've got like bourbon bottles and old milk cartons as houses. But then if you get down to the lower crust, it's like more dilapidated, just straight, cardboard boxes.
You've got the pharmacy receipts as the
yeah,
bridges,
right?
the really long bridges.
Oh, it's so cool. And you have in the sands between like the life preservers or whatever as like gateways.
Oh yeah, love that idea.
Oh, there's just so much cool stuff going on here. Enemy designs are creative. I'm thinking specifically of like archer crabs. Like they're using rubber bands in their claw, and then the arrows are just toothpicks.
Yeah.
How dope?
It honestly feels like every area and every character and every enemy is like when you were a kid and you took all these pieces around your house, all these everyday objects, and you smashed them together to make your own imagination of like a new character.
Or like if you were gonna like build armor for yourself and you just grabbed some garbage.
Yeah. Like if these characters came alive like this in this cartoony way, this is what they would do.
Yeah.
They would take a bike lock and make a guillotine out of it. You know?
That one is so cool.
Yeah.
And like the seahorses that have the like little Tic Tac cachets, but they're not Tic Tacs inside. It's the like animal sponges that expand.
I know, that was incredible. Every time we find a new character, a new enemy, a new boss, I take a second to just decipher what's going on. Not because for any like strategy in combat. I just am curious.
Yeah.
What is your life like?
What trash do you love?
Yeah.
Man? Like,
or what did you just happen to find?
Oh, it's so cool. I think the platforming is fun nearly all the time. There's a little bit of jank, and I'll add that to my complaint section. But in general, like the platforming feels really good for the most part. Everywhere that you need to reach with your little swim, you can get to. And if not, there's like a tech upgrade, or maybe you just haven't found the grappling hook yet. Yes. And then once you do find those items, then those objects open up to you. One of my favorite things about the game is actually the upgrade system and the rate at which you get stuff. I think all that feels amazing. At the beginning of the game, like the first third of the game, I was like, oh man, I don't know if I like Souls-likes. This game is rough. And then like I get more and more microplastics, and I get to level up my adaptations and use those more effectively. And by the end of the game, Krill is the beast. He can like take down... Yeah, I was finishing like the last 5 bosses on the first try. Like,
I would say that even though the end of the game still remains hard, maybe it's arguably harder than the beginning of the game. You are so much better, and just having that experience firsthand of playing the game is huge too. But then also just the power of your stats being so strong.
Yeah.
It means that your power scales differently than I think in other Souls-likes. Yeah. Or at least maybe differently than you might expect. You actually can do really well at the end of the game.
Yeah, it felt amazing. By the end of the game, like I was struggling more with some of the platforming than I was with some of the like enemies. And that was like awesome. I love the upgrade system. I love the skill tree. I love upgrading my adaptations. I love getting microplastics to level up. I love just like
Hackers.
buying all the cool different shells from Shellfish Desires.
Yes.
Like it's
And like, I'm going to compare this to Death's Door, where we had, I think it was 4 skills we could increase when we leveled up. In that game, it was hard to pick which one to level up because they were all so good. I'd say that's the case here. Like,
pretty similar here.
I was leveling up attack mostly, but I always wanted resistance. And I always wondered, what if I increase my vitality or MSG? I was balancing a little bit.
I think we have the what we decided to go in as a topic later, but I played a little bit differently than you. So.
Okay, I'm curious to compare and contrast. Yeah.
And then I love finding all the little references, not only to realize stuff, but to like especially to Going Under. I got a little bit more out of this game than most people will get because I played Going Under. Like
many more people have played this than Going Under. Yeah.
I found cubicle boxes. I found a Joblin mug.
Joblin mentioned.
Shout out to Sando. Joblin mentioned. Take a shot. God, there's the N64 looking cart for Going Under 64.
I found that. Yep.
There's one of the costumes is a Going Under reference.
Love that.
And there's more stuff, but those are the ones. Oh, obviously the first shell you unlocked is a Fizzle can. That's from Going Under.
Fizzle is it's one of the brands.
That's the one that Jackie works at. So I love finding the Going Under references in addition to like your CVS receipts and your, if I swear to God, if this isn't butter, I'm going to lose it,
Yes, so good.
Just a bunch of different stuff. And then the last thing I want to mention in the like section is, as weird as it sounds, we kind of lose our way a bit as we get further in the game. And I mean, as Krill. And I kind of think this speaks well to how like even the most well-intentioned or, as you put it, apathetic people in the system can still sometimes get caught up in this like winners and losers system. And like, to me, it's sort of like this artful portrayal of how studies have shown recently that like the lowest income people are like the greatest participants and sometimes victims of like our lottery systems that we do.
Wow.
And so it made me think of that as I've learned more about how that affects lower income people even more.
Yeah, it's inescapable. It does reflect our real world. This is an important game in many ways, and I did not expect that.
Anyways, I do have complaints. I mentioned this a second ago. There is sometimes platform jank. I found this a lot, specifically in Flotsam Vale as we're climbing up the big tower.
The electricity tower thing. Yeah.
There's like small holes in the platform that are mostly decorative, but krill will fall through those if you're not careful. So I found myself struggling with some platform jank, especially in Flotsam Vale, just like falling through platforms that I don't feel I really should have fallen through.
Yeah.
But that can happen, and then you can find yourself with a long climb ahead of you.
Yep.
And then really my only other complaint is that the game is a little too big. I don't mean too long. I mean too big.
Areas where you can just almost endlessly explore.
Yes. Like if I, again, compare this to Hollow Knight, the map in Hollow Knight is probably bigger, but it's a 2D experience. So anything that you're not seeing is stuff that's like hidden behind breakable walls or something.
Yeah.
By the very nature of being a 3D experience in Another Crab's Treasure, you could explore super thoroughly and still miss so much just because you didn't turn your back at the right second, you know?
Especially in places like the Sands Between.
In the Sands Between. Yep, that's the big one. There's so much stuff in this game that I missed because I know there's stuff that I missed. I don't have all of my heart kelp sprouts, and I don't have, all of my blood star limbs.
Same. And the Shelleport feature tells you how many crystals you're missing in each area.
Yeah.
Crystals are what you use to buy upgrades to adaptations and other things.
And I'm really close on that. I'm only missing 15 in the whole game.
Oh, wow.
But like in some areas, I'm missing 2. And I don't know how I'm ever going to find that.
That's going to be one deposit somewhere.
Yeah.
Or one enemy somewhere.
Luckily, I have everything upgraded that needs that. So there are more crystals in the game than you need. But that's just one symptom of the whole thing. It's just like The sands between is too big. Flotsam Vale has too many branching paths. The bleached palace is a nightmare to get through.
It's big.
So some areas are just too large. Another complaint, maybe the game is too long, but I don't feel as strongly about this because I enjoyed pretty much every moment except for the Unfathom and the bleached palace. Anytime
two of the final areas of the game,
yeah,
basically.
anytime I was playing this, though, I pretty much never wanted to stop.
Yeah, I was streaming this whole game pretty much. I had one session where I did side stuff off stream, but I never wanted to put the controller down and stop stream.
Yeah.
But, I only stopped because it was time for bed.
Yeah, you were like racking up some really long streams. And
I was, and I just really wanted to keep playing this like you, yeah.
But yeah, Another Crab's Treasure was an absolute delight from start to finish with very few roadblocks along the way for me. Fighting is fun, collecting is fun, exploring is mostly fun, the game is funny. I love the commentary in Another Crab's Treasure and just Aggro Crab's whole catalog, including their social media. Finding all the going under references is a massive fun time bonus, and even though this game is actually quite a time commitment, something we're not always fond of here, I really, really want to play this game again. It might just be on the lower end of this score, and I don't want to devalue this score, but I can't really think of any reason why this isn't a 10 out of 10 for me.
Oh, amazing. Nice. I kind of expected that, honestly.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought you would love the crap out of this. And I could kind of tell the way you were chatting about it, too. Just, you seemed really passionate about it. And I'm between two scores today for this.
Oh, boy.
And I think maybe you're influencing me to take one of the scores over the other, but I love this game too. I had an addicting shell of a good time with Another Crab's Treasure. It is hard for me to summarize everything when I think about things I love because literally dozens of aspects of the game speak to me and work so well together. And I would say this is an example of a game where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I think this all comes together into just like a really fantastic package. The characters and the story really stand out for me. They didn't for a while, and they grew on me.
Yeah.
They really did. At first, it's a really straightforward adventure, but it turns into something much more. It reflects on the problems of our own human society, but it does it through the lens of ocean creatures who in turn are actually affected by our real human atrocities. So we see how what we do might affect these creatures, and it imagines a whole story from their perspective. So there are tons of layers to what's going on here, but somehow the story also operates so simply, and it has a message that I love. And in fact, the wrap-up of this game, the very final cutscene, has one of my favorite endings of recent memory, and I think it just really sums up what the game is about so beautifully. I love the exploration of this game. There is a diverse offering of areas. There are huge open areas, like you said, that convey the enormity of the ocean, and I actually love how enormous. I love the grand nature of what's going on.
I do appreciate that it is like that we've only explored 10% of the ocean, you know, which is an incredible thing to just try and fathom. Maybe they could have made my point a little bit easier with some more invisible walls, I guess.
Sure.
But anyways.
Yeah, there are two sides to that coin where it can feel like there's a lot of stuff you're missing. It can be easy to be lost in some places. You can be unsure of where to go. But at the same time, wow, this is evoking the scale of like Solar Ash, you know, what I remembered from that game. Abzu didn't feel this large, but Abzu still kind of conveyed the enormity of the ocean. And I'm just thinking back to that too. Going off the beaten path is always rewarding. Even if you know where to go, if you decide to go in any other direction, you're going to find something. You're going to find a Bloodstar limb. You're going to find a stainless relic that you can use to upgrade your fork. So I loved taking the side paths and just 100%ing areas as best as I could as I went along. The combat is engaging and offers many tactics. I was changing my tactics between bosses sometimes. I did run with, a general strategy, but I was using charged attacks a lot. I was fast dodge rolling, and that strategy was useful throughout the whole game. But when I needed to focused on backstepping and doing the follow-up attack on some bosses. That worked super well.
Yeah, you use that a lot, which is something I never used.
And that's completely valid. There are tons of options to how you play this game. I love exploring the adaptations. There are some that didn't appeal to me, and then I try using them and I fall in love with them. They're amazing. Stowaways made fighting more dynamic the further I got too. Just tons of options of just passive things you can carry on your shell that give you passive abilities. Boss fights, like you said, are incredible. They're imaginative. They're epic. They're intense. They're frantic. They have very understandable tells too that feel possible to learn and react to. So you might get your stuff tossed in the first couple of attempts, but you really pick up on their patterns really well. And I think that's because they designed these tells to be so expressive. There's a nice balance of difficulty as a result. And by the end, I feel so powerful that late game bosses feel dangerous, but so does Krill. And so I can sort of steamroll to the end of the game, which is what you want, especially in the Unfathom and the Bleached City. You know, in Old Carcinia, if you will, you want to be able to just keep going and going. I commend the music too, for all the reasons you said. There are shortcuts in this game too.
So many.
That I love. You know I love a shortcut.
I know you love a shortcut. Thought of you every time.
we create better traversal all over the place. You're rewarded for exploring every nook and cranny by having these hooks that you can lower, and then you can grapple onto those and they'll ascend up and bring you to a platform that took you so long to get to before. I love the cleverness of this game, the shells and the costumes. This game's chock full of puns and wordplay everywhere. Just too many instances to mention. There are lovely little references and Easter eggs all over. There's the stuff with going under. There are also references to Dark Souls with the helmet shell and the Solaire outfit. Just amazing stuff. Really fun things that make me smile every time I find them.
I suppose at this moment we could shout out that one of the costumes is also from Rivals of Aether, which is a game I haven't played, but is on my potential secret game list.
Yeah, tons of stuff like that that I might not have picked up on. So everybody is going to notice different things, which is fun too. So then you can compare notes and go like,
oh, and Subway Midnight. One of the costumes is from Subway. I wore that for most of the game.
oh, and I know that game, but I didn't realize that. There's also a Cult of the Lamb outfit. Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Sorry.
Wow. That's such a deep cut
It's
for them.
super deep cut.
What?
Shout out Bubby Darkstar.
Interesting. They must be fans. So then I get to dislikes. Just generally, I think this game has jank and you get cheesed by enemies in combat sometimes in a way that just feels unfair. And I think that comes with the territory of Souls-likes. This happens. We will cover this in a second, but I've played a couple of Souls-likes before, and this just is something you gotta deal with sometimes. Things will not always work in your favor, and so it's nonetheless frustrating, and you just have to retry from the nearest moon snail shell and, you know, hope that you have a luckier situation. There is platforming that's rough. I largely do love platforming where it's just going from platform to platform and using your little float move. But when you use your grapple to get to a platform, for instance, the camera loves to zoom in and you lose track of where Krill is, and then you're moving the camera to try to find him so that you can catch the ledge. And I missed so many ledges because that camera went wild, and just his trajectory of where he went after grappling was odd. And then you talked about the invisible walls. I actually thought the invisible walls were a little disappointing in places like the shallows because it looked like I could just keep going and it just felt arbitrary that there happened to be a wall there. So I always prefer in games like that where instead of showing me the vista, which can be cool, I almost prefer just build in a wall
Like
there.
a rock wall.
Build in a rock wall. I'm fine with that. And it happens sometimes in boss fights too, where there was actually an invisible wall for one of the endgame bosses. And I was like rubbing up against it, trying to avoid a projectile. And I was like, oh no, there's a wall here and I didn't know that. So yeah, it's not a huge complaint of mine. And honestly, it was hard to come up with a long list of dislikes. So overall, Another Crab's Treasure is a game I couldn't wait to play between sessions. I just wanted to keep playing it. It's one of the most inspired indie games I've ever played. I think it wears its inspirations on its sleeve, but it also fully commits to its own world and themes. I think this is fantastic. For me, Another Crab's Treasure is a 9.5 out of 10.
That's what I put down.
Yeah. It was between a 9 and a 9.5.
I was crossing my fingers. I was like, is this the next one? Is this the next one where we do it?
Oh, yeah. 9 and 9.5 were the two I was between. I'm going with the higher one, though, baby.
Yes.
Yeah. Loved it. So we got to talk about Souls-likes because I've played a few, and I was noticing time and time again how Another Crab's Treasure does things similarly, but also differently. I thought you would find this interesting. The one that I can really draw on, that because I've played it the most and I've played it multiple times, is Bloodborne. I have tried Dark Souls 3 different times. I get a little further each time. I want to eventually play that. I want to play the other Dark Souls games. And then I've played Demon's Souls as of last year. And I really enjoyed that game too. But I haven't played Sekiro. I haven't played Elden Ring. I want to play these games. But here's what I know and what I noticed. And this is not going to be an exhaustive list too. But Bloodborne has this mechanic called the rally mechanic, where when you get hit, there's like 5 seconds where you can hit the enemy back and you can recover most or all of your lost health. And it's this mechanic that encourages aggression because Bloodborne is very fast, and there's more about just being aggressive and fast and trying to be offensive. And so this rally mechanic is something that you kind of learn to rely on so that you're not always healing yourself. In Another Crab's Treasure, there's a skill called self-repair, where if you sustain shell damage, you can follow up with an attack soon after that to recover that.
That was something I used a lot.
You use that a lot?
I used that a lot, especially in like the fight against Haikia. I don't think I would have won against him without it.
That's wild because I don't think I had that skill for that fight. Dang. I kind of wish I did though, because I was losing my shell a lot in that fight. Here's another thing Bloodborne does. When it comes to lore and the bosses, there are a lot of lore-rich bosses that have histories that stretch far before the timeline of the game. And this reminds me of, I won't necessarily say their names here, but 2 of the late game bosses remind me of this, where they have a place in the world and their stories actually extend decades before the events of the game. Bloodborne also has regular and transformed trick weapons. So you get a weapon by default, it has kind of this normal appearance, but then you can do an alternate version of the weapon where maybe it's longer, but it's slower. This is kind of like changing your fork into a hammer in Another Crab's Treasure.
Okay.
So I thought those were really clear inspirations.
I was like, where are you going with that?
Yeah.
I couldn't remember, but.
Capsizing in Another Crab's Treasure is like doing visceral and critical strikes in other Souls-likes. But there are some differences that I really find interesting. Unlike other Souls-likes, falling in pits doesn't instant kill you. And I think that's important, where so much of the game has pits.
Yeah, very pitful.
Yeah, it's full of pits. And you, unlike other Souls-likes, armor isn't available in multiple slots. You can't wear, greaves and a chest piece and gloves and a helmet and choose which ones you find. And you're always finding different armor. You find outfits that are cosmetic in Another Crab's Treasure. And you find shells, but you're not spending all this time trying to find the right outfit and comparing the weight of items versus your endurance, which determines how fast you roll. It's really just, is your shell a heavy, medium, or light shell? And that's how fast you'll move when you dodge. And that's how much defense you'll have. Easy. And you can change it. You often change it multiple times in a play session. There's another difference where, unlike Souls-likes, there are a variety of accessibility and approachability options in Another Crab's Treasure. And this is incredible to me. The amount of customization you can put into the game when it comes to difficulty. I played around with some of this stuff. I finished the game, and I did some cleanup afterwards where I wanted to collect some things for trophies, and I turned on the gun, so that I could just go into these areas, not worry.
Once you've done it, easy decision.
Exactly. But I was wondering if you used any of these features or if you were aware of them.
I was aware of them. I didn't read the exhaustive list. For example, there was this one ledge that I got to in the Bleach Kingdom, Old Carcinia or whatever.
Yeah.
There is no way for you to safely land anywhere to get out of this situation.
I think I had the same thing. I wonder if it's in the exact same spot. It's near
like
a moon snail shell.
Yeah, and it's like a piece of styrofoam, and it's near, I think, a seahorse.
Okay. Mine is near the two lobsters, like close to the end when you fight Campcha.
Oh,
I found
okay.
a spot where I got stuck.
Yeah. But I didn't know that you could, A, turn off losing microplastics, and B, turn on recover your lost microplastics. So I didn't read the list of options.
Sure.
I knew about the gun, but I didn't know about most of them. So I didn't use any of them, and I waited until the last hit on the last boss in the game to use the gun so that I could trigger like 3 trophies at the same time, which is just sort of like a mini challenge I do with myself.
Yeah, but what's great about Aggro Crab is they want people to enjoy the game no matter their needs and their experience level with these kinds of difficult games. So it's fine to turn this stuff on.
I kind of want to go back and check out Going Under because I didn't explore to see if that was an option in there.
Oh.
There's a lot that I'm still missing in that game. I really wanted to platinum that before Another Crab's Treasure, but I'm still missing just so much. So if there's a way
to speed that up,
I might check that out.
Yeah, so I used a mixture of just none of that stuff and then some of it at the end for collection purposes. I had someone in my chat wish for more accessibility features like dyslexic fonts. So you could say that this is really impressive, but there's always more that can be added to. So I hope that's something they consider. I hope that's something that all games consider that have text.
I think it's young enough that could still
happen. Exactly. It's only about a year old.
So let's talk about how we played differently. Exploration, upgrades, go-to shells, adaptations, stowaways, and all that. I watched a lot of what you played, so I know that our stowaway game was mostly the same.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Amazing.
But, and this is a topic I wanted to talk about specifically, is just most useful items in the game. So I'm going to sidetrack this topic for a second. One of the most useful items in the game that I found was the contact lens stowaway. I had that on for almost the whole game. It shows you the enemy's life bar, including their specific HP.
Yeah.
But the big bonus in that is that any enemy that's hiding underground is visible to you from forever away.
So like a bobbit worm?
A bobbit worm
is there. Yeah.
Crab, those little anglerfish dudes that were hiding in the Unfathom.
Any crabs that are hiding under a shell that you think is just a shell.
Yep, you can see the hermit crabs before you know they're hermit crabs.
And that only costs like 1 or 2 points.
Yeah.
It's 1 to wear that. Wow.
So I had that on for like the whole game, even boss fights when I could have taken it off for boss fights. But I left it was so useful. I left it on the whole time, and
I didn't even try it.
Even useful when you're like just going through the world, you can just see like this is a side path. And I can see how many enemies are there.
Oh.
And I'm just like,
amazing.
I know I can't handle that right now.
Okay.
So I'll go somewhere else.
So I got that contact lens. I might have tried to wear it, but I didn't give it enough of a chance to know all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the description said, reveals enemy HP. And I'm like, enemies already have an HP bar. So I unequipped it.
Yeah.
And I never used it.
No, it's super useful.
Amazing. Wow.
I think I left it on for so long because I only had like 3 or 4 stowaways at that time and couldn't afford any other build anyway. So why would I take it off?
Yeah.
And then I just left
it on.
I loved it.
Wow. That would have been useful, especially for bobbit worms, in my opinion. I wish there were more slots for stowaways. Like,
yeah,
you get plenty of points that you can use to equip them, but I mean, like, you only get 3 slots.
If you could just buy like 2 more. Just 2 more.
Yeah.
I think that would be
If we could
Perfect.
wear 4 or 5 stowaways, that would be great. And then I'd be fine wearing less expensive ones.
Yes.
To mix and match even
Yep.
more. Yeah, that would be
Um,
so tight.
But other really useful stuff, I ended up going really heavy in adaptations, and I was using the first claw adaptation like all the time. But yeah, as far as like exploration, obviously I'm trying, like with any exploration game, as long as I feel like I have the health and the ability to do so, I'm taking side paths.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of like the Grove, the expired Grove. When I was getting in there, I was like, there's a lot of archers. I'm not really strong right now. So I was kind of like mainlining it for a lot of the Grove.
Yeah.
But
A lot of dashing around, sidestepping,
Yeah.
and taking diagonal routes so that you miss the arrows.
But I am always trying to go on side paths in pretty much any exploration game. As for upgrades, I went heaviest in attack and MSG.
Okay.
And MSG really served me well.
Nice.
I was
Yeah.
like, using that sweeping claw is the reason I defeated bosses so easily at the end of the game.
Wow.
Because it also builds the, what is it, capsizing or whatever?
Yeah, the staggering
Yeah.
mechanic.
Yes, it builds that too
Yeah. Sure.
and triggers it as well if they're like at the limit. So it just
Yeah.
is like a
And then you can capsize them, and then did you follow up with like the downward plunge attack?
once I did
Yeah,
unlock it.
that's
Yeah,
so cool.
super useful.
What I love about MSG, the potential there, I didn't really put any points in that. I put maybe 2 in there total. But this game allows you to build a spellcaster like you could do in other Souls-like games.
That's
Like
kind of
you
what
could,
I did.
and I was more of the melee person.
Yeah.
So, but just between our 2 playthroughs, we spec'd out quite differently, even though it looks really basic when it comes to those stats. It's only 4 stats. In other Souls-like games, it's many more stats, and they're often vague, and you have to research them. You have to like figure out what synergies they have with equipment you pick up. And it just becomes almost like doing spreadsheet work sometimes. But here, I love that it's so simplified and straightforward. You get it. MSG is just spell casting, attack is your melee stuff, and vitality and resistance are straightforward too. Let's go. Let's just keep going.
I think at the end of the game, I was at like 12 vitality. I put the lowest amount in resistance. I think I was at like 9 or 10.
Okay.
I was at like 16 attack and like 16 or 17 MSG.
Okay.
So that's sort of how I built mine. It was mostly balanced.
I barely put any into vitality. I maybe put like 6 into vitality, 2 in
your
MSG.
vitality was pretty low.
But I really went hard into attack and then resistance.
Mhm.
Resistance, I wanted to get up super high because every time you add a resistance, that's -1 damage to your shell health. And I thought, is it possible to get to the point where most enemies will not destroy my shell at all or won't damage it at all?
Yeah, I wonder.
And I actually kind of got to that point where a lot of basic enemies, a lot of non-boss enemies would hit me and I might lose health, but I'm not going to lose my shell. And that's huge. That's just one less thing I have to worry about. So that was great.
And then for me, it was like I was claw sweeping these mofos so fast they couldn't touch my shell.
Claw sweeping these mofos. Yeah.
Okay, so for like go-to shells, for a lot of the game, it was the fizzle can, just because I really liked the spell, and it was lightweight. Then eventually it became, pretty much just whatever I could pick up for a little while. But then when I got to the end of the game, I found this like toy truck, like one that you would have out in like a sand pit.
I found that too. Yeah.
It was a little heavier than I like, but it still rolls and had high enough defense. I didn't even use the spell on it. It was just like,
it
was
was fun
sturdy.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And then eventually, once I realized, I should have been using the disco ball this whole time because of obvious reasons.
That was one of the last ones I found when I was doing post-game cleanup.
Yeah,
actually.
I hardly used it, but at a certain point, like my shell health didn't matter. So like once I got to that point, I was just like, all right, disco ball, here we go.
There you go. Yeah. Iconic. Very iconic.
How about you?
When it comes to stowaways, I'm guessing you used Chum and Frederick like I did.
I
That's
used
what you mean
Chum
there?
for most of the game. I did my Frederick spot was taken by the lens for most of the game.
Yeah.
And then I used the lamprey and then the lamprey plus once I got it.
Okay.
For health regen.
Nice. So I chose Chum and Frederick, which are two fish that can accompany you and attack enemies for very minor damage. And Frederick actually increases the amount of microplastics you earn too, as an added bonus. Chum you get from a boss. Frederick you find in the sands between. And I chose these guys. Initially, I just had Chum, and I chose Chum because I thought, ooh, extra damage. I'll take it, you know? But the more the game went on, the less it was about damage and the more it was just about companionship.
Yeah.
These guys were my buttos.
They're friendies.
They're friendlies, and they would show up in cutscenes swimming around. It was cracking me up because someone would be delivering a monologue and then here's Frederick just swimming by. Here's Chum swimming by. And these guys are just going everywhere. And I feel like they're so buggy. They will attack enemies and then they'll just go and hang out next to you, not realizing you're in a combat encounter. And I couldn't figure out how they worked sometimes. I would unequip and re-equip them and then they'd become hostile towards enemies again. So that's one way the game is just kind of
has some jank.
Unpredictable, janky.
I had one time where I wasn't paying attention to whether or not they were there most of the time, but I had one time where I got out of a shelleport. I'm like, hey, where are my fish? They're both gone.
Yeah.
They were just both gone.
I had boss fights where it'd be like, I'd have the boss a third of the way down and I'd go, wait, where are Frederick and Chum? I'm soloing. Where are they at? And then I went in and re-equipped them and they showed up again. So I don't know why that happens, but I did have a really cool moment with Chum where Chum delivered the final blow to the intimidation crowd boss.
Yeah.
That was really nice. And I was cheering Chum and Frederick on. I'd be like, come on, Chum, you got this. So it was a fun little piece of entertainment for me to have those guys around. When it comes to exploration and earning upgrades, I also took some time to farm some bobbit worms in the sands between. This is where having the contact lens would have been helpful, but there's a little pocket in the corner of the map.
There's like 27 of them or something.
And you can get tens of thousands of microplastics. So I had one session where I played this game off stream. And in that session, I explored the sands between to look for upgrades and hidden goodies. And then I also fought the consortium boss. That was basically 4 hours worth of game time was doing that exploring and doing that boss. And so farming was part of that. That's where I discovered the bobbit worms. And I was like, ooh, cool. I'll just earn some extra microplastics to get some level ups. But other than that, I just kept on the path. I would do side stuff when it showed up, and I never really farmed other than that time. When it comes to adaptations, I loved the Mantis Punch because at level 3, you can teleport to enemies. They won't see you coming if you're far away enough, and you can just deliver a blow that gives them tons of capsize damage. And then I would capsize them and do the downward plunge. Near the end of the game, I used the tactical tentacle a lot, leveled up to level 3, and this was so useful. This heals you. It swipes in a super wide radius. I don't know if I would have been able to beat the last like 2 or 3 bosses as quickly without it.
I used that big time with the lamprey equipped in the like Bleached Kingdom, trying to get around there because you have the crabs that also like shed their shell too. And they hit hard. So if you're like getting hit a lot, and I am a lot of the time, I can heal most of that back.
Yeah, it's so nice. It's so nice. And I saved myself when I was out of heart kelp. I had 0 left, and I was able to recover my health from almost dead to full.
That happened to me too.
In a boss. Yeah, it's amazing. And then go-to shells, I would say just light shells. Yeah. Because in these games, I like to roll fast.
And you were using rolling in your shell like quite a lot more than I was.
I would hide in my shell anticipating attacks, but I would decide to dodge at the last second. And in Souls-likes, I always like having the access to speed. That is very important to me. I get that defense is super great too, but I would wear stuff like the Tonka truck and I'd be like, this is nice to have all this shell health and to have all this defense for sure, but I like just being able to quickly dash away. So that's kind of how I played. I discovered some tactics too, like you can steal a hermit crab shell from it if it's hiding.
I didn't even know that. Like, I tried to take one of the shells one time, like crawl in, but I didn't know that you could like hook it and pull the shell off of it.
I discovered that by accident.
That was
you know?
so cool. It was a revelation to me. I was already done.
Yeah.
So there was nothing I could do with it. But
I did try to get comfortable with, in the middle of a boss fight, if my shell broke, using my hook to grab a shell nearby, and it auto-equips it in one animation. That felt so cool because it was like I was saving time.
I saw you save yourself like at least 2 times doing that.
There were times too where I like speed, not only with dodging, but also attacking. And when you use your hammer, your attack speed is really slow.
Yeah.
You hit hard,
Super hard.
but you're slow. And so sometimes I don't like the hammer.
Yeah, I didn't like to use the hammer too much myself. But I mean, I did use it on a couple of bosses, and admittedly, I just
It did work really well.
obliterated them.
Yeah.
So
and I know our friend Grant played another Crab's Treasure, and he used the stowaways that increased hammer damage.
Yep, and he teched 100% into attack. He maxed out attack before doing anything else.
He's going for just big, slow attacks that if they connect, they're going to do massive D.
Yeah.
And so these are just a few examples of all of the different strategies you can use. But when I have the hammer in a boss fight, sometimes I have to do the thing where I
Swap the shells.
swap the shell,
Yeah.
ditch my shell, then wear my shell from my hammer.
Mm-hmm.
And I managed to do that in a boss fight where they almost hit me, and I'm scrambling with all these button presses because sometimes you equip the hammer accidentally.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a bummer sometimes. Now, we've touched on a couple of these topics, but when it comes to the story and the themes and the world building of the game, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Krill's character goes through quite the transformation. He goes from indifferent to realizing his usefulness in the world by the end. And you mentioned some stuff there about our society and lower income classes and how this game reflects the harsh realities of that and just the inescapable qualities of a capitalist society for certain groups. Is there anything else in this area you want to touch on?
I mean, you got the whole spectrum of losers represented. You've got the people that believe in the system, like Firth. You've got Nema, who lives in the system and, is struggling harder to survive because she has young ones at home.
Yeah, and so she's kind of tied down.
Yeah,
she can't
she
just
has to
leave.
participate.
Right.
Yeah, but she also, like, the sunk cost, fallacy works differently for her because ultimately can't support for your children if you're dead,
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got Krill, who learns about the system and kind of embraces it at a point. And then you've got Conch, who doesn't care about the system. He just cares about the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got, those are like your nonprofit workers. Like, you've got everybody
cares
here.
about knowledge and the history of the place.
Right.
And there's the person, Tortellini, who is the town greeter or something, and he just wants to make like a touristy place. He wants to create a welcoming place for more people too.
Yeah.
And so some of them you kind of side with, some of them you definitely don't side with.
Gee, who?
And I think it goes to show that there's not one true enemy in the world. There's the horrors of what past people have done. There's the selfish tech bro. There's Roland, the evil billionaire. It's like, I think it's interesting that this game has several antagonists, and it's almost hard to pick which one is the main one.
Right.
I can't think of
like
another.
you do have a final boss, but
You do.
yeah. It
But
doesn't-
you almost don't see it coming.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. And I think that's the point. I think the point is, no, this isn't a traditional story where there's one villain who wants to destroy the world. There is something awful. There's something evil. And it creates more evilness in different shapes and sizes. And how you react to each one, what your reaction is I guess it's important that you do react.
Yeah.
You don't become
That's
complacent.
a great way to put it.
Complacency is failure is the point. And that's the idea that I get at the end of this game, so beautifully wrapped up in the final cutscene. I think it's just so well done. It's so simple. It does all sound complex, but at the end of the day, it is really simple. So that's what I wanted to say about the story and world building. But then when it comes to some of those fun aspects of how the world imagines everyday objects in new ways, for instance, there are things like the scuttling sludge steamroller. This is a boss in Flotsam Vale. Wears a broom head to look like a Roman helmet. There's stuff like this. There's, you mentioned the Duchess uses the tea infuser as a weapon and also has a tiara with a 30 on it.
Oh,
you can imagine that was a tiara worn by someone for their 30th birthday.
Right.
And it fell to the bottom of the ocean and she picked it up and now it's hers. The bike lock used as a guillotine. Like all these fun things, I think just add a lighter layer too that I really appreciate. Another thing we can look at is areas of the game. I think I have a favorite area, but it's kind of hard to pick a favorite. I really liked the Curdled Village.
Okay.
This is the cardboard city,
where
it is stressful.
Yes.
But wow, it's so memorable.
I think that is the most memorable part of the game. So yeah, I guess I like it for what you're doing there, at least in your first visit or whatever. First several visits, because you're probably going to die a bunch.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Just as far as like how it looks, for me, I like the Expired Grove quite a lot. I like the concept of Flotsam Vale, just like all of what is connected and what it's all doing. Exploring it's maybe a different story. But
yeah, easy to miss things there.
Yeah. Well, moving on from favorite areas, let's talk about the big one. What's our favorite bosses?
I really liked Hykea, the intimidation
that's
crab.
Everyone's favorite.
Is that
dude.
everyone's? Yeah. Just a nice amount of challenge and cool attacks and design. Epic, fast. You feel like that one is where the game really ramps up in difficulty significantly for the first time. It's like, oh, okay, we're playing a Souls-like here. And I died quite a bit to this one. How about you?
Hykea as well. I also, there are several. I really loved Topoda. And real quick, shout out Topoda. He's voiced by
Zolivir Nelson Jr. from Strange Scaffold, yes.
Yeah, really incredible voice. I thought maybe it was the same voice as someone from Little Guardsman, which is why I looked it up.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently not, but awesome fight there. Apparently optional. I didn't know that, but it's like right after Hykea. So I was like fighting Hykea, and then I fought Topoda just like back to back, and I'm like,
it unlocks the ability to upgrade your adaptations, so it's super important.
And those bosses were just like super cool. I think the lycanthrope is weirdly cool. He's not super memorable with like anything that he does, but the disease lycanthrope just like stood out to me. And then I think the consortium is one of the most creative bosses.
Totally. I have this one down as being one of the biggest discrepancies between like cool boss design, but absolutely frustrating boss encounter when it comes to combat.
Yeah.
I died to this one the most, far and away above any other boss. Yes.
Ooh, I got him in like 3, which like
really
at the point when I fought him way late because I missed him.
Yeah.
I beat him in like 3, but that was still like a lot for that point in the game to die 3 times because I beat like the accumulator right away. I beat Roland right away. So even just getting 3 deaths on that, and that's a boss fight where the lens is actually super useful.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
And so you understood what was going on immediately, whereas I had to sort of figure it out. But I still died to tons of sudden attacks. It smashes you. It rolls over you. It has a tentacle that hits you very quickly without much of a warning. I don't know.
It has the flare gun, which is like one of the strongest boss attacks in the game.
Yes, you get on top. You have to destroy 6 knots on this cage that's housing all these demented crabs, which is a really cool idea. They're all working together.
Yeah.
And it's this big boss. It's all these crabs as one unit.
And an octopus.
And you have to climb on top at one point, and that can be just kind of strange. I got 1 hit away from beating it 3 times, and I just got killed before I could get that last hit in. And the way I beat it is actually because I was using a fizzle can, and I popped the bubbles, and the bubbles glitched and actually attacked the boss's health directly rather than the knots. So I cheesed the boss accidentally.
Yeah.
That's how I beat it. So,
Wow.
and that was still after probably 30 or 40 attempts. Honestly, this boss killed the crap out of me.
Wow, really?
I didn't fight him as late as you did. So,
Okay. You know who actually took me a long time that you beat really quickly
Who's
was
that?
actually the Duchess. I struggled
Oh.
hard against the Duchess.
Yeah.
Like I was playing
She's
it.
hard.
I was playing it for like an hour one night, and then was home with the kids, and I was like, they can see this game. This isn't gonna scar them. And so the only time they saw me playing Crab Game, which they thought was cute, I was fighting the Duchess like the whole time, and I finally did it after like 30 minutes down there with my kids on my lap.
Yeah.
Fighting the Duchess.
Can't you see how worthless this all is? Is that seared into your brain?
I did forget about it actually.
Okay.
But,
Now it's back.
Now it's back. So yeah, that one took me a long. Ikea did take me a long time, but
Yeah.
it was a super cool fight. I felt that was the most rewarding victory for me.
Totally. Yeah. I had a couple of first try bosses, the Polluted Platoon Pathfinder, one of the early ones. I barely remember it because it was over so
yeah.
fast.
That's one I actually got cheese on. We can talk about that when we get to that section. But yeah, first try for me too.
Nice. And then the False Moon one. That's one where you kind of get surprised with a boss fight. And I was like, oh no. And I actually suspected that this was happening. And then I was like, okay, maybe we're safe. And then it happens.
Yeah.
And that was really satisfying to get on the first try.
Yeah, I had a lot of first tries, especially at the end. False Moon was not one of them, but pretty much everyone else after that was.
One other note on the end game bosses, I think it's really cool how at the end of the game, we start getting all these bosses that have 2 phases.
Yeah.
But the game previews this by having us fight tons of the small crabs that get reborn after they die. Really cool way to set that up to ease us into that idea. And then that's actually a Souls-like thing too, is, you know, a lot of bosses have 2, sometimes 3 phases. And it's cool that they found a way to do that without it feeling cheap, I think. And actually the first time it happens, it's like, oh, I should have seen that coming.
Yeah.
I didn't see it coming.
It's not like
that was cool.
Dr. Wily's capsule pops out of the bigger spaceship. And
it's
now
like,
you're fighting
okay, this is
thing.
just arbitrary.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, let's talk about cheese. How did it's a 2-way street of cheese in Another Crab's Treasure. How did the game cheese you? How did you cheese the game?
So a lot of the time, the cheese is happening to me when I'm falling through the platforms, like I mentioned in Flotsam Vale, in the big stupid electric tower.
Right.
Other times, the crabs that have the umbrella and also the crabs that have the like olive on a stick poker.
Yep.
Those guys are cheesing me the most. The seahorses too. So like all of those guys are all in the same section of the game.
Yeah.
And they're all cheesing me, just like knocking me out before I can even like get inside my shell, basically.
Yeah.
But in general, archers, once they're like in close combat, can kind of mess me up. I get kind of cheesed by them sometimes.
Definitely.
As far as like cheese that I did, I got the Polluted Platoon Pathfinder. I got her stuck up on a ledge where she couldn't reach below to hit me, but I was able to swing up at her.
Oh, love that.
That's why it was a first
Love
try
stuff
for me.
like that. Yeah.
Actually, the captain of the guard, I forgot about this, but he got stuck behind like a sandcastle wall for a little while and couldn't figure out how to like get around it.
Nice.
So as long as I like stood back while he was doing his lunge attacks, I could just run forward and like hit him a few times and like fizzle can him. And so that's how I was eventually able to defeat him. Pagurus has like a secret weakness. Obviously, I took advantage of that.
I found out about that long after I beat him the traditional way.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a character you can run into who tells you about it, right?
Yep.
And that's how you found out?
I knew about it before I ran into that character, but then I ran into that character and I didn't use it until I actually found it. So
to make it feel like you earned it a bit? Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
And then, there was another one. Oh, during Topoda, and this happened to you too. You just didn't live long enough to realize how bad it was. He like flings you way up in the air sometimes, and you can land behind the kelp wall, and then you're just stuck back there.
You're stuck. I tried to move in there, and I'm like, where am I?
It's
I have no
like hard to
comprehensive-
see, but it is also a wall that you just can't get past.
But he can still get to you and
Yes.
attack you. Yeah, that's
Yep.
so unfair. That's in my list too.
That was it mostly. I got stuck on a ledge. I mentioned that already.
Yeah, I have tons of similar ones. I think of the Curdled Village. There are cliffs above the Curdled Village that you can climb to, and there's a section with 2 archers on platforms, and you need to grapple to some netting, and they can snipe you out of the air, which is fine because that could be my fault because I didn't wait for the proper timing. But when I respawn on the ledge, their next arrow is already coming at me.
Oh, I did see that.
And
yeah.
this also happened to me in the Unfathom in a similar way, where I fell off a ledge because I got shot. And then I'm just thinking, because I had that experience above the Curdled Village, I think, when I respawn, that thing's going to be shooting me already. And I respawn and I'm getting shot.
That's exactly what
and
happened.
I die. And that I can't react to that.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. So I wish the game knew to just wait to attack you until after you respawn on a ledge. Super specific scenario, but it happened more than once. If I had a nickel for every time this happened, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot of nickels, but still weird that it happened twice. Also, there was a time where I fell in a pit during a platforming section where you're doing a lot of grappling, and I respawned in the middle of the air. So
That did happen to me one time.
when you do that, you then have to like swivel your camera around to find the next grapple point, or else you're falling in the pit again.
Yeah.
And that I died
I
that
didn't
way.
have a grapple point. I was just falling.
Oh, that sucks. I had the Gravekeeper Topida moment too. So those were like the big ways the game cheesed me. How I cheesed the game. I mentioned the thing with the consortium, which was an accident. I didn't mean for the soda can bubbles to defeat it directly like that, but it just happened. I had lots of instances of guiding enemies to the ledge and just letting them fall off. And sometimes I'd use barbed hooks to pull them to the edge of a ledge that I was standing at, and then they would just fall. That was nice.
There's another one I just thought of that isn't cheese. I think that's strategy, and this one is strategy.
Okay,
The cuttlefish that's in the Unfathom, the guy that shoots you with the glow sticks around his body or whatever.
Yeah.
If you lure him to an open pit, because he can float, like he can fly basically. If you lure him to an open pit and shoot him with the bullet adaptation, he just falls.
Oh, nice.
And dies.
That's
So-
nice. Yeah, I wish I had used the bullet more. I think that sounded really useful. And then similar to Nephro, is that his name? The Royal Guard guy?
Yeah.
I had an instance in the Shallows where the Royal Shell Splitter, this is the first optional boss of the game, who tosses your stuff if you try to fight him. I ran into him after doing the first 2 bosses again, and I was like, maybe I can take this guy on. And he was kind of tough, so I started running away. And he followed me. And I went over a small cliff, over a sand castle. It's like a circle with a wall around it. And the Royal Shell Splitter went into that sandcastle and got stuck in the sandcastle. And I turn around and I go, oh, you're stuck. And so I would sneak in and get a hit in every now and then. And it took like, several minutes to whittle him down. But then when he had 1 hit left, he climbed out of the sandcastle. I was like, oh no, oh no. And this is on stream. So I have 1 hit left. He has 1 little sliver of health left. I'm like, okay, I have to prove I'm a real gamer now. And I did dodge a few of his attacks and managed to get the last hit in. But if he had hit me after all that work of keeping that cheese up, that would have been the most embarrassing moment of my life, probably. So I'm, yeah, that was probably my most memorable moment from the Shallows in the game. Wow. There's a lot to talk about here with Another Crab's Treasure, but I'm so glad we both loved it. One of the best games of the season so far. Incredible.
Yeah.
I'm so glad it was as good as it was.
Yeah, I love it. It's on both my lists. We're going to follow up on the lists later this season, so I'm just going to leave those alone for now. But yeah, I love this game a lot.
Nicely done with exploring it completely and thoroughly, and it was great to talk about this one. So that is our review of Another Crab's Treasure. You can play it on PC, Switch, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S. DiscoCola rated it a 10. I rated it a 9.5. That's the end of this episode of Underplayed. You can find more of our episodes at kzum.org/underplayed and on common podcast platforms like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Our music was composed by Jack Rodenberg. Our art comes from Onimochi. Check out our show notes where you can find and follow us across social media. Underplayed is on Bluesky, Instagram, and Threads. You can find my links down below, and I stream a variety of indie games on Twitch.
And I am also on Twitch at DiscoCola and all of those other places where I played my secret game today, #blood, and where you can also find Underplayed Podcast on Twitch, where we'll be playing Octodad, Dadliest Catch.
Yes, very soon.
Yeah.
Next time, we will have 2 more secret games to review, and our featured game will be Her Story, an interactive investigation film developed by Sam Barlow. Until then, everyone, keep on playing.